All right.
Okay. So we all have that one thing that we absolutely cannot stand. You know, it makes us sick to our stomach just thinking about it. But at the same time, you really enjoy it. Now, I'm talking about having like a love-hate relationship with something. Whether you hate or love school at the same time, or maybe it's your boyfriend or girlfriend, maybe your parents, maybe you hate this class, but you come for Richard's jokes. But for me, personally, I don't like learning about history. I think it's like, not that I hate it, I just think it's boring. But ironically, I like the history of the National Football League, but more specifically, history of the Green Bay Packers. Okay. I may not know everything about the Packers, but I've researched enough to recognize that this is a great team and organization full of historic events that's helped shape the NFL to the way it is today. Today, I'm going to share with you some highlights from the history of the Green Bay Packers. I'll be going over the origin of the team, eras of significance, some notable people from the Packers, and some games worth talking about. What better way to begin than to share how the Packers came to be? Basically what happened was on August 11, 1919, a man named Curly Lambeau gathered together a group of athletes in order to start a football team. This is them in their snazzy uniforms. Lambeau asked his employer at the Indian Packing Company if he could sponsor them and, let them use their equipment and their athletic field for practice. The Indian Packing Company agreed, but in exchange, they had to name their team after them, which is where the Packers came to be, their name. 2 years later, after being created, they joined the NFL, and their legacy was beginning. If you stop thinking about it, it's pretty crazy how they came to be. It's, I wish I was walking the street and some guy said, "Hey, why don't you, Justin, Skylar, and Maggie play football for me?" That'd be pretty cool. We'd be ballers. We'd be the Richards of Fullerton. It makes me wish I was around back then. I want to play football, National Football League, but who knows? Okay. Now that you know how the Packers became a team, it's time to talk about when they really broke onto the big scene. I didn't mean to rhyme. It just came like that. All right. So we'll start off with the 1960s, also known as the Lombardi era, where it was a really great decade for the Packers. They hired a little-known New York Giants assistant coach named Vince Lombardi as their head coach and general manager. That's him right there, not wearing uniform. And that's his quarterback at the time, who would be a Hall of Famer, Bart Starr. In their first season under Lombardi, they finished with a winning record for the first time in many years. Lombardi won Coach of the Year, and the Packers carried that momentum into the next season, where they fell just short of a championship in Philadelphia. The next couple of years would be ones to remember. The Packers won NFL championships in the years 1961, 62, 65, 66, and 67. So that's 5, you guys count, which is a lot for a decade. That's like half the decade. Okay. After they won the NFL championships in 66 and 67, they still had something to play for. For the first time ever, the champions of the NFL would face off between the champions of the AFL. There was 2 separate leagues at the time before they merged, became NFC, AFC, NFL. Anyways, to decide who would be, at the time, undisputed world champion of football. This game would later be known as Super Bowl I. In Super Bowl I, the Packers faced off against the Kansas City Chiefs, where they won 35-10. The next year, at the end of the 67 season, they played the Oakland Raiders in Super Bowl II. It wasn't much of an epic battle, as the Packers easily beat the Raiders 33-14. After the game, Vince Lombardi stepped down as the head coach and general manager of the Packers and brought an end to the Lombardi era. He actually went on to be the general manager and the head coach of the Redskins, and then he died. So, I don't know. No, I'm just kidding. But anyways, during that time, the Packers won 76% of their games, and including a 9-1 record in the playoffs. The Lombardi era produced 11 Hall of Famers, which included Vince Lombardi himself. We're going to skip the next couple decades because there weren't really any highlights there. I'm talking about the 70s and 80s. I guess the only highlight would be they usually had like one of the top picks in the draft. They weren't that good. Anyways, they barely won any games, and they didn't reach the playoffs for almost 20 years. It wasn't until this next era that excellence and winning was brought back to Green Bay. In January 11th of 1992, the Packers hired San Francisco 49ers offensive coordinator Mike Holmgren as their head coach. Holmgren helped the 49ers win 4 Super Bowls at the time, so he was like the hottest guy to hire. This was the beginning of the Holmgren era. He's right here, and that's America's favorite hillbilly quarterback, Brett Favre. Anyways, it all began when Holmgren actually traded for Atlanta Falcons backup quarterback Brett Favre. And although Brett Favre had an up and down start to his career with the Packers, he ended up becoming a 9-time Pro Bowler, 3-time NFL MVP, and breaking many NFL records, such as most passing yards thrown in a career, touchdowns thrown in a career, and even the most winning QB in NFL history. Together, Holmgren and Favre would win 6 division titles together, 2 conference championships, and 1 Super Bowl. That Super Bowl they won together, known as Super Bowl 31, was against the New England Patriots. The Packers were always the favorites to win the game, but the Patriots put up a good fight until the second half, when the Packers blew them out. It was pretty competitive. I don't really remember because I was like 6, but I remember seeing like, oh, Super Bowl 31. I was like, oh, the G's versus the weird guy holding the football. You know, that's what their logos were. Anyways, the next season, the Packers made it back to the Super Bowl, fell short to Hall of Fame quarterback John Elway and the Denver Broncos, losing to them 31-24 in what was a game for the ages. After the '98 season, Holmgren resigned to become general manager and head coach of the Seattle Seahawks, ending the Holmgren era. The years after that era weren't bad, but they weren't great either. Favre led them to 3 more division titles, 4 more playoff appearances, and things got really ugly. Like after the 2005 season, the Packers went 4-12, which is, and they had like the number 5 pick that year in the draft, so that was heartbreaking. And they were looking for some answers to help them return to the championship days. This is when a new era began. On January 12, 2006, the Packers hired Mike McCarthy as the new head coach. Since this is more recent, I guess you can call it the McCarthy era, but we'll refer to it as the present. That's him with the hat, and that's quarterback Aaron Rodgers, who's the quarterback now. Anyways, in his first season, the Packers got off to a slow start, but finished strong with a 4-game winning streak to finish the season 8-8 and barely miss the playoffs. They would carry that momentum into the 2007 season, where quarterback Brett Favre basically rejuvenated his career. He was like 38 at the time, so that's really old for a quarterback or a football player. And he had arguably his best season ever and led them to a 13-3 record. But unfortunately, they lost to the Giants in the conference game, or the championship game. After that season, Brett Favre retired for the first time, basically from the Packers, before that whole little Favre watch started. And the 2008 season would be a rough one because they were breaking in Aaron Rodgers because it was his first season as a starter. And it was also the first time in 16 years the Packers had a different starting quarterback other than Brett Favre. They finished that year 6-10, but felt confident that they were on their way to success. The 2009 season, Rodgers established himself as one of the bright young QBs in the NFL, and McCarthy was recognized as one of the great offensive masterminds in the game. That season ended on a sour note, though, as the Packers lost to the Arizona Cardinals in an overtime wild card game, which ended with Aaron Rodgers being sacked. He fumbled the ball, and then he was trying to get it, and he ended up kicking it into one of the Cardinals defenders' hands, and he ran in for the game-winning score. So it's kind of hard to watch. I mean, you know, you're supposed to throw the ball, but kick it. I don't know. Anyways, so after that, with the taste of that game in their mouths, they went to the 2010 season, you know, wanting to prove a point, wanting to make a statement, and that's what they did. Even though they barely squeaked into the playoffs that year, most teams feared the Packers because they could strike from anywhere on the field. And that's exactly what they did. Once they reached the playoffs, no team stood a chance. They won 3 road games in a row in the playoffs to make their 5th Super Bowl appearance, where they faced the Pittsburgh Steelers in Super Bowl 45, which was this past February. And what looked like to be a Packer blowout at first actually turned into a real close game with the Steelers coming back, but the Packers being victorious, beating them 31-25. The Super Bowl trophy, also known as the Lombardi Trophy, named after their Hall of Fame coach, Vince Lombardi, was coming home to where it all started, and the Packers were on top of the football world once again, and still are on top. There are a lot of more historic events in the Packers' history I wish I could talk about, but I can't because I'm sure I'm running out of time. But anyways, hopefully you guys got a kick out of the events I mentioned and have a new perspective to how legendary this ball club actually is. Some people may think that